Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be doing a review of a recent read, which is This Kingdom Will Not Kill Me by Ilona Andrews. So for those of you who have not heard, This Kingdom Will Not Kill Me is the new first novel in a series by the husband-wife writing duo Ilona Andrews. And Ilona Andrews is really well known for their urban fantasy series and urban fantasy novels, and I believe this may be their first foray into a more intense epic classic style of fantasy. And this has been getting a lot of positive reviews across BookTube. It's a new 2026 fantasy release, the first in the Maggie the Undying series. And I wanted to pick it up because I had been hearing so many positive things. As kind of mid-year videos started to come out, people have been talking about their favorite books of the year, giving some top 10 lists of books from January to June. I have seen this book on so many of my friends' lists, and it made me want to pick it up. So we organized a little buddy read on the Discord, and I was finally able to get to this one, and I am happy to report that I really enjoyed it. I gave this book a 4.5 stars. I thought that it was a fantastic read, very absorbing, and I wanted to take the time to do a full review just to give people a little idea about what to expect from this book, who I think is going to like it, and what parts of the book I think truly shine. So, as I said, this is the first in a new series by Ilona Andrews called Maggie the Undying, and the basic premise of the book is that a young woman from our world, who I think is in her early to mid-20s, named Maggie, wakes up in a fantasy world from a book series that she loves. And I think here we can see that Ilona Andrews are probably big fans of A Song of Ice and Fire, because the premise kind of sounds like it is taken from a person who has been a longtime fan of that series. So basically the series, or the world that Maggie wakes up in, which is called Cair Torin, is from a fantasy book series that was never finished. So a book series that she has loved her whole life, that she has read so many times that she can recite passages by memory. She knows the character, she loves the character, she has all of her fan theories. These books have gotten her through the good times in her life, they have gotten her through the worst times in her life, and being a fan of that series is fundamental to her personality. But the series was never finished. There was a book 1 and a book 2, and it actually says at a certain point in the novel that these were both plus 1,000 pages, so like thousands of pages of this world. But book 3, for some unknown reason, has never been released. So Maggie wakes up in this fantasy world without clothes, disoriented, hurting, and with absolutely no idea how she got there. So that is how the story begins. She's just kind of transported into this world without any idea of how it happened. What is fun, and I think, so this is fun for a variety of reasons. So I think it's really fun for people who are big fans of fantasy, which most of us are, right? We know what it's like to fall in love with a series like that, to know or feel like we know characters intimately, to have analyzed and over-analyzed all aspects of the plot, to have our own theories about why people do the things they do, why certain events have taken place. And then, of course, to have our theories about what we believe is going to happen. And whether or not this particular part of Maggie's knowledge is helpful to her or a hindrance to her is something that I'll talk about in a little bit. But I think it's a premise that a lot of fantasy fans can get behind. Maggie is also a very self-aware protagonist, so having grown up in the 21st century, she is well aware of the tropes of portal fantasy, you know, classically what happens in these stories, the kinds of trouble that people run into, what typically will slow a heroine down, what kinds of mistakes she wants to avoid. And that self-awareness also makes the book really fun, because there's certainly a lot of conveniences that take place in a book like this, and because the authors know that the readers know what these conveniences are and what these classic tropes are, they also like to kind of poke fun or just give Maggie reasons why things are working out, right? She makes a joke about how she had been reading this fantasy book, and one of the idiosyncrasies of the book had been that there was working plumbing and toilet paper. And then she's like, well, thank goodness there's working plumbing and toilet paper, because I wouldn't really like to be in a fantasy world where there was no toilet paper. And so some of those little things are in the book, and I think Ilona Andrews did a great job of giving Maggie enough to work with. For example, she can speak the language, she can understand what people are saying, but also giving us a little nod as readers to say, I know that this doesn't all make sense, but this is the way that it's got to work in order for us to have a cohesive story. So it helps you work with and kind of swallow those plot inconsistencies and conveniences, I think, with minimal damage. So it's a really fun setup. Maggie is kind of cast into this world, and upon waking up in this world, the other big kind of reveal, which is part of the plot summary of the book, so not a spoiler, Maggie finds out that she is able to survive at any cost. So there is a violent altercation in the very first chapter of the book where she should have died and does not. And so that leads us to wonder, how did she get here? Why is she here? And what kind of magic is keeping her alive? And those are kind of the fundamental mysteries of the plot. Plot-wise, I think that this clips along at an excellent pace. So the basic setup is really fun, and Ilona Andrews, they're a well-seasoned team. They are used to, I'm sure, writing really fast-paced, really exciting fantasy novels. And this is very easy to get through. So very readable. One problem that I see brought up a lot in terms of reasons why people struggle a little bit with this book, or especially why people struggle with the first half of this book, is because there is a lot of info dumping. So Maggie is tumbling into a fantasy series that she knows really well, that we as the readers do not know really well. And so there are some, I think, kind of clunky parts where there's a lot of info dumping. So Maggie will either encounter a character, and then there's a lot of internal monologuing about, oh, this is this person, who is this person's son, who took place in this campaign, and this is why this happened, and this is why I need to talk to him. And it is, I think, a little bit difficult to get through those initial parts. I don't have a very high tolerance for info dumping. I don't like it. I think it interrupts the flow of a story. I just think that it is clunky writing in terms of technique. It would be difficult, I think, to write a story like this one without some degree of info dumping. What I personally think makes it a little bit more difficult for this book specifically is that on top of there being a lot of information that is given out, Ilona Andrews also has a very descriptive writing style, and some people really love this. People, I find, who are big world building enjoyers really like this level of detail. So we get details about the history, about the currency, about the government, about the mythology, about the clothing, about the economy, the way that things run. And so we get a lot of details that I don't always need when I read a fantasy story. I am a low fantasy, soft magic, whatever you want to call it. I am a very character-focused reader. I don't really care if I know all of these things about a fantasy world. I don't need that to feel immersed, and I don't need that to feel like my characters are alive if I believe in them and I believe in their motivations. However, if you are a person who really likes that kind of stuff, something more akin to a Brandon Sanderson or a Robert Jordan, where you get a lot of that detail and you feel like that makes for a richer, more believable world, then I don't think that the info dumping will really bother you. There's a lot of it, but the plot and the characters, I think, make up for that initial deluge of information, and it starts to kind of settle out by the time you get to the end of the novel. Where I think this novel really shines is in both the character interactions and the plotting. Maggie as a main character is really enjoyable to follow. She's down to earth, she's caring, and I think it's a combination of she's a genuinely nice person, and she has fallen into a story that she loves beyond all compare. She has empathy for these characters. She has followed their journey for years. They have, as I said before, gotten her through some of the worst times in her life. And so she feels very attached to them. And her purpose, or what she wants to do in this world, is to stop it from falling into, or kind of devolving into, this tyrannical government breakdown. So what is supposed to happen along the timeline is that someone who should not be in power is going to come into power, and she wants to prevent that from happening, which will then in turn prevent the deaths of some of the characters that she really loves, and will prevent the city itself and the country itself from falling into complete chaos. So that is the goal that she has set for herself. And as she is going to accomplish that goal, she gathers characters around her. Some of these characters are very well-known characters in the series, characters that Maggie is very attached to, characters whose fates Maggie would very much like to change, either because bad things are going to happen to them or bad things are going to happen to their families. And some of them are side characters with throwaway lines or characters who have no speaking lines at all. And this is the second place where I think the book really shines, is that as Maggie spends more time in this world, she starts to care about people and care about the place as something outside of a fantasy novel. She goes from thinking about the people around her as characters. She goes from thinking of them as characters to thinking of them as complex individuals who have their own lives, whose lives are important to other people, who are all interconnected in this wild web of the world. And she starts to care about them in a different way. So there's a really big found family element to this story. And I think that that is one of the most heartwarming parts, is that you get to see her as she creates genuine friendships. You get to see as she utilizes some of her 21st century knowledge to help people who are in this situation. But then you also get to see as she relies on them for things that she would not have learned growing up in the time that she does. So there's a good kind of exchange of information, intermingling of people from different places and times, and you get to see them come together. This is not, I would not call this a romantasy. I don't know if Ilona Andrews, if what they write otherwise is classified as romantasy, but there is a strong romantic undercurrent to this book. If you're somebody who is used to watching anime, for example, which I do think that Ilona Andrews must be big anime fans, because there's a lot of, they make reference to certain tropes from anime and use certain terms that make me believe that that's probably the case. But this is what I'd call a reverse harem situation. So basically Maggie is our main character, and many of the handsome, powerful, intelligent men who are around her are all seem to be falling for her at the same time. And I really enjoyed that. If you are someone who does not like a main character that everyone seems to love, then you may not enjoy that aspect of the novel. But I will say, Maggie, because she is from a different time, a different place, and because she has this knowledge, this specialized knowledge of who people are. She knows secrets about people that they would never have told anyone else because she has read about them in a book. She seems to know what is going to happen. And so that does make her different from most of the population. It does make her stand out. It does make her appealing. It does make her a powerful piece on just like the greater political chessboard. And so I can understand why people are drawn to her. When characters start to get to know her, you also get to see that she's, compassionate and empathetic. She's hardworking. She is self-sacrificing. She is, many things that are admirable. And so characters also come to like her for those reasons as well. I think Ilona Andrews did a great job at maintaining the romantic tension in this book. As I said before, I read this as part of a buddy read, and it was mostly women and one man who read the book. So all of the women I read this book with loved the romantic tension, thought that it was great. It was well balanced. It was a romance that you could get behind. We were all really excited for more. It was just enough to kind of keep you interested without it being overkill. But the one guy who read this book with us said that he did not enjoy that aspect at all. So take from that what you will. But I personally thought that the romantic tension was excellent. It did not overwhelm the plot. I think it underscored the character development. It gave you something fun to look forward to. It was not over the top or the kind of dialogue or interactions that I think turn a lot of people off from romantasy or make people feel like they don't enjoy a romantic subplot in their fantasy. So I don't think that it's so much that it would be overwhelming to somebody who does not enjoy as much romance in their fantasy. But for people who do love an undercurrent of romance in their fantasy, I think that you will enjoy it a lot. Personally, because as I said before, I don't really love the info dumping, like that style of writing as much. I had been riding through this book thinking that it would sit at a solid 4 stars, but because of the romantic tension, because I was so invested in the relationships between the characters, and because of an ending that I thought was excellent, I bumped this up to 4.5 stars. So I do think that it is well worth picking up. I think that it is worth checking out, especially if you love portal fantasy, if you are someone who likes intricate world building, if you are someone who doesn't mind some plot conveniences and a protagonist that is going to be attractive and well liked by most of the characters in the book, then I would highly recommend picking this one up. There are dark things that happen, but I would say, you know, overall, we're trying to avoid that kind of dark timeline. And so I do think that there's an undercurrent of hope that runs through this. There are fun magical creatures. There are fun animal companions, kind of all of the classic fantasy tropes that we really grow up loving. Because I do think that ultimately the reason that so many people are loving this book is because it is a story that calls out to the fantasy nerd in all of us. It is about loving a world. It is about loving the tropes that make fantasy so precious to us. It is about loving all of the bits of magic that come along with that. And because the main character loves all of that as much as we do, I think that that makes her someone that we can identify with and someone that is enjoyable to follow. But I thought that this book was fantastic. I had a really fun time reading it. And like I said, the ending was explosive. It was exciting, and it made me really want the next book. So I am very much looking forward to getting book 2, and this will definitely be a series that I pick up and read the second that it comes out. So I hope that this was helpful if you're wondering whether or not you will enjoy this book, if you're thinking about picking it up, and if you are someone who has already read This Kingdom Will Not Kill Me, then please let me know your thoughts below, and I'll see you with another video soon. Bye!